How you doing? My name is Antonio. My page is Unapologetically Black. I ask that you like and subscribe to the page and share this video. What I want to say to black people when it comes to black on black crime, I want to say to black people the issue is you can't see the forest because of the trees. As a black person, all that you see is other black people trying to rob you. But what you don't see is the economic castration that black man has suffered due to the hands of the American political system. What you don't see is the deindustrialization of the black community, where they not only close the manufacturing jobs now in our community, they demolish the manufacturing plants or altered them so that they could not no longer be reserviced in order as a means to create jobs. See, so you don't see how this economic condition creates crime within your community, but you say, well, why don't they go outside their community? Like I said again, you can't see the forest for the trees. You deal with the police constantly pulling you over when they leave outside of your community, again, entrapping the most impoverished in the same community, forcing them to have to prey upon one another. This is why I say when it comes to crime, black on black crime, you can't see the forest for the trees. And it's time to stop blaming black people for their reaction to their predicament and start attacking the policies that created the environment that produced those predicaments. Deindustrialization is a process of social and economic change caused by the removal of reduction of industrial capacity or activities in a country or region, especially of heavy industries or manufacturing industries. So when we look at the fact that we had a great black migration up north in order to fill these industry jobs that led a lot of blacks to the inner cities, right? And then you turn around and see with the closings of these factories and industries, you don't only see the closing of them, but you see the entire removal of those infrastructures so that they cannot be refurbished in order to provide goods and services for your community. This is what black communities all throughout America suffer from. It's called deindustrialization. There are a different interpretations of what deindustrialization is. Many associate American deindustrialization with a mass closing of automaker plants in the now so-called Rust Belt between 1980s and 1990s. The researchers pointed to investment in patterns rather than in new capital equipment as a contributing factor. Exactly what I'm saying. They closed down the factories and destroyed them. In Milwaukee, it was A.O. Smith and Briggs and Stratton's a lot of buildings. A straightforward long-term decline in the output of manufactured goods or in employment in the manufacturing sector, a shift from the manufacturing to the service sector so that manufacturers have a lower share of total employment, such as a shift may occur even if manufacturing employment is growing in absolute terms. For Black Americans, there has been a shift in us having manufacturing jobs to us working service jobs. And when most of our community, that is what you see, people working at Walmart, fast food restaurants, or people doing Uber drivers. There's been a shift to service. There has been no reinvestment, right, to replace the deindustrialization of the urban communities. And this has led to crimes. This has led to what is called in our community job deserts. Today, I'm going to look at a different issue: job deserts. Job deserts are essentially an area with a surplus of workers and a service shortage of jobs. These areas are usually located either in rural communities or in impoverished and deindustrialized urban neighborhoods. Most of these regions were once characterized by a large company or industries which completely dominated the area and its economy, and which provided the bulk of jobs to the community. Since then, the industries has left and nothing has arrived to fill the gap. The result of such a situation is predictable: family breakdown, skyrocketing rates of drug and alcohol abuse, a growing informal economy whose often illicit work replaces that of the formal economy, and depopulation. How does the one deal with such a situation? There are a few ways. In cities, better public transportation can allow residents to commute more easily, thereby leading them to be able to find work in better areas. Encouraging entrepreneurship and business development in these areas is also a path forward. In rural areas, there needs to be a strong focus on encouraging both people and industries to revitalize these towns, incentivizing companies to set up roots in a declining area can lead to more small businesses popping up to meet the demand for a better off workforce. None of these things have been done when you look at inner cities such as Milwaukee. A.L. Smith and Briggs and Stratton's has majority left Milwaukee inner city areas, and most of the factories now sit on the outskirts of Milwaukee next to work release plants. Now, when you think about your community, I want you to look around and really think, are there any really living wage paying jobs within your community? And then I want you to think about how many temp services have buses that are forced to bus people out to work. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that these factories were built in locations where there was scarce on gaining employees? You don't set up a retail store on a location where there is no traffic, because that is your customer base. See, prior, when we had a manufacturing boom in America, if you notice, at one time, most factory or jobs were along the bus route, because you wanted to make sure that people were able, or employees were able, to get to the job. This gave you a greater variety of amount of workers to choose from, and allowed you to be more selective on your hiring policies. So to limit yourself to a smaller group of people is counterproductive to business, unless the purpose is to starve out another community, impoverish them, so that you can constantly go into that community and gain out and pull out cheap labor. How do we seek to deal with this lack of jobs in our community? We sought to deal with that by going outside our community to pursue employment, but the consequences of that was the over ticketing of our community. The consequences of that is going to work is costly for black people, because you're pulled over, unfairly ticketed for speeding, draining money up out of our community, as well as the commute to go back and forth also takes wealth out of our community. Also, you're going to end up putting gas and spending money in the other area that you are currently employed in. This is another method to drain wealth out the black community. But the whole time, going back and forth to other communities is a risk for black people. University. The book The book takes a deep dive into the official data behind 14 years of traffic stops that occurred through 2016 in the state of North Carolina. The legislation there mandated the collection of routine traffic stop statistics, including race, age, and gender of driver and outcome of the stop, in an effort to confirm or refute widespread opinion about this desperate treatment of drivers based on race. The book findings are especially relevant in light of ongoing civil unrest over negative police interaction with African Americans. For me, is that driving while black is very much a thing. It's everywhere. And it's not just a North Carolina or Southern problem, but across the United States, Snub said. The second thing is that it appears to be a more systematic than a few bad apples officer engaged in racial profiling. Significant findings from Snub and her colleagues, analysts of the North Carolina database, include blacks were 63% more likely to be stopped, even though as a whole they drive 16% less. Take into account less time on the road, blacks were about 95% more likely to be stopped. Blacks were 115% more likely than whites to be searched in a traffic stop. 5.05% of blacks to 2.30.5% for whites. Contraband was more likely to be found in searches of white drivers. So black drivers were stopped disproportionately more than white drivers compared to the local population and were at least twice as likely to be searched, but they were slightly less likely to get a ticket. Snub says that that correlates with the idea that black drivers were stopped on the pretext of having done something wrong, and when the officer doesn't see in the car what he thought he tells them go on their way. For a separate paper entitled Racial Disparities in Traffic Stops Outcomes, Snubs and her co-authors gathered and analyzed traffic stop data from law enforcement agencies in 16 states, including Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, Ohio, and Vermont, that pointed to similar disparities in the rate at which black drivers were stopped and searched compared to white drivers. Driving while black is a very much thing. It is everything, everywhere. And it's not just a North Carolina or a Southern problem, but across the United States. So when I talk about we have barriers to gainful employment and we understand that we do not have living wage jobs within our community, and you have to commute out and you see that they are unfairly charging or pulling you over and ticketing black drivers, taking wealth from our community again. These are barriers to employment that uniquely face black people. But white people will take this and say, this means he don't want to work. White people would take this and say, this means he's making excuses. You're making excuses. How you doing? My name is Antonio. My page is Unapologetically Black. I ask that you like and subscribe to the page and share this video. What I want to say to black people, when it comes to black on black crime, I want to say to black people, the issue is you can't see the forest because of the trees. As a black person, all that you see is other black people trying to rob you. But what you don't see is the economic castration that black man has suffered due to the hands of the American political system. What you don't see is the deindustrialization of the black community, where they not only close the manufacturing jobs now in our community, they demolish the manufacturing plants or altered them so that they could not no longer be reserviced in order as a means to create jobs. See, so you don't see how this economic condition creates crime within your community, but you say, well, why don't they go outside their community? Like I said again, you can't see the forest for the trees. You deal with the police constantly pulling you over when they leave outside of your community, again, entrapping the most impoverished in the same community, forcing them to have to prey upon one another. This is why I say when it comes to crime, black on black crime, you can't see the forest for the trees. And it's time to stop blaming black people for their reaction to their predicament and start attacking the policies that created the environment that produced those predicaments. Disparities in traffic ticketing. Key finding: black drivers disproportionately receive more traffic tickets than their counterparts that were that were whites or from another minority group. Black drivers accounting for approximately 31% of motorists receiving 58% of traffic tickets. White drivers accounting for almost 50% of motorists receiving 36% of traffic tickets. Blacks are more than 2.5 times more likely to be ticketed than whites. Members of other racial groups are approximately 1.3 times more likely to be ticketed than whites. We already know this is a means of draining economic wealth out of an already impoverished community. These things are already known to us. There's nothing to study. It's been done. The actions have occurred. We have to understand that they have weaponized the entire government against Black America.